On our wedding night, my husband abandoned me for a concubine. The entire household watched the stepwife's humiliation. I summoned all his children before me. Follow your mother, and you'll feast on delicacies with a secure future. Follow your father, and you'll only gain more stepmothers and half-siblings to divide the inheritance. One may be simple-minded, but never foolish. To care for my eldest sister's 2 children, I married her husband, Qinjian, as his second wife. On our wedding night, with red candles blazing, a concubine called him away. Beneath my veil, I heard him rise. Finally, I couldn't bear it and lifted the crimson silk. The Qin family, renowned for generations of scholars and officials, would commit such foolishness, abandoning his lawful wife on their wedding night for a concubine? Qin Jian remained silent for a long while before turning the accusation back at me. The concubine is unwell. As the mistress of the house, you should tend to her. How could you stand by and do nothing? His gaze turned icy as he met mine. Is this the upbringing of a Qin family heiress? I laughed bitterly. So this eldest son of a scholarly family was fundamentally incapable of discerning right from wrong. And what I detested most in life was dealing with fools. Early the next morning, I summoned my elder sister's children, all the concubines, and their offspring. Listen carefully. I scanned their youthful or anxious faces. Our mother possesses wealth and influence. Her children will live in luxury, their future secure. As for our father? I sneered. He will only bring you endless concubines and half-siblings, diluting your inheritance, connections, and prospects. I lifted my teacup, gently blowing away the foam. One may be slow-witted, but never foolish. Follow me or follow your father. Think it through before answering me. The Time Travel Bureau promised me, succeed in the Qin household, and I could return to the modern world. Qin Jian was hopeless. My only hope lay in his children. Fortunately, raising children, that was precisely what I excelled at. Last night was my wedding night. Though merely a second marriage, I entered the Qin household as the principal wife, properly betrothed with formal ceremonies and carried in an 8-man palanquin. Yet my nominal husband, the eldest son of the Qin family, a lineage steeped in poetry and scholarship, generations of officials, the esteemed junior minister of the Supreme Court, abandoned me on our wedding night to seek out his concubine. When I urged him to stay, citing the rules of our noble families, he turned and looked down on me with a condescending gaze. Is this how the Qin family taught you to defy your husband? Seeing him dressed in his fine robes, I suddenly understood this man was unreliable. If he was unreliable, why bother to please him? This morning, I went alone to pay my respects to my in-laws. I wanted to see how this so-called noble family would account for last night's events. My in-laws proved reasonable, at least on the surface. The meddling Lady Li was confined to her quarters for a month, and Qin Jian was ordered to apologize to me. He stood before me, his tone flat. Last night was my fault, madam. Please forgive me. I sidestepped him. If my lord truly feels it was improper, perhaps we should discuss something more practical. His brow furrowed slightly. First, the children left by my elder sister shall be raised under my care. Second, concubines and their daughters must honor me with the respect due a principal wife. Any violation will be severely punished. Third, any servant showing the slightest disrespect toward me shall be flogged and expelled from the estate. Qin Jian's pupils contracted slightly, clearly not expecting me to present demands so directly. His clenched fists turned white at the knuckles. My mother-in-law hesitated, while my father-in-law pondered briefly before finally nodding. With their consent, I immediately punished the 2 maids who had openly gossiped about my lonely wedding night as I passed through the corridor this morning. Both were Qin family slaves. Though their faces turned ashen, they silently acquiesced to my punishment in the name of propriety. Qin Jian remained silent, a vein throbbing at his temple, before finally storming off. My wet nurse looked worried. Offending your husband and in-laws on your very first day. How will you manage? I smoothed my sleeve, my tone calm. It matters not. The Qin family has upheld its reputation for generations, valuing propriety above all. Since they use rules to pressure me, I shall use rules to protect myself. If he dares to torment me, I can use their very code of conduct to turn it against him. The fate of those 2 maidservants ensured no one in the Qin household dared treat me with disrespect again. At the very least, no one would dare pay lip service to my orders while secretly disobeying them. Before long, my elder sister's 2 children, Qinjian's 3 concubines, and 4 illegitimate offspring all came before me to pay their respects. Seated upright in the large armchair, I quietly observed them, in no hurry to speak. 10-year-old Xiao Jier held the hand of 8-year-old Sugur. The 2 children bore a striking resemblance to each other and also carried traces of Qinjian's features. Qin concubine's sons, the 7-year-old Zhu and the 6-year-old Jian, looked at me with nervous unease. Zhou concubine's 6-year-old daughter clung timidly to her mother's skirt, while Hu concubine held the newly 3-year-old Pian in her arms. Though there were many illegitimate children, thankfully all younger than the legitimate children. It seemed the Qin family still valued some decorum, refusing to let the illegitimate children precede the legitimate ones. I explained concisely whether the set belonged to my mother or father, then waved them away. The wet nurse stepped forward and murmured with a smile, "Madam, your words just now were truly unconventional, refreshingly novel." I looked at her, my gaze steady. A father's standing determines a child's standing outside the household. But a mother's standing within the inner quarters determines a child's standing within the family. Find an appropriate moment to share these words privately with the children. I paused, my voice softening yet each word clear. Also, pay close attention to the wet nurses and concubines serving each child. I want only 2 kinds of people, those who are dutiful and those who are wise and discerning. As for fools, not a single one shall remain. On the day of my return visit, I went alone to bid farewell to my in-laws. My in-laws felt guilty that Qinjian hadn't returned to their chamber for 2 consecutive days. Not only did they increase the homecoming gifts by 30%, but they also wanted to summon him for a lecture. I raised my hand to stop them, a distant smile playing on my lips. There's no need to force the issue. I married into the Qin family solely to care for my eldest sister's orphan child and maintain the good relations between our 2 families. Beyond that, I seek nothing else. Outwardly, I shall uphold the dignity of the Qin family's eldest branch. Inwardly, it is best to maintain distance. My tone shifted subtly, carrying implied meaning. After all, since my husband has failed to fulfill his duties, how could I, as his wife, fully discharge my marital obligations? My in-laws were both astute individuals. They recognized the finality in my words. Though their expressions darkened, having been in the wrong from the start, they ultimately refrained from pressing the matter. I returned to my maternal home alone, bearing a lavish gift list. Mother's expression darkened the moment she saw Qinjian was absent. I gave a subtle nod, and my wet nurse tactfully explained the reason. It's simply that I refuse to grovel and humble myself, so he's trying to use this to manipulate me, I added lightly. My mother's anger flared, ready to erupt, but Qinjian arrived just in time to apologize. My parents' expressions softened slightly, and the polite formalities continued as before. Privately, Mother clasped my hand. I ask not for harmony between you and him, only that you protect your sister's offspring and maintain outward peace. The Gu and Qin families rise and fall together. I understood the stakes well. Our families were deeply intertwined, mutually dependent. Qinjian could neglect me, but he dared not divorce me. And I, in turn, need not grovel for his favor. As long as I avoid major missteps, he holds no real power over me. On the return journey, I rode alongside Xiao Jier and Sugur, deliberately ignoring Qinjian. His pride wounded once more, he remained sullen-faced throughout the ride. Upon returning to the Qin residence, I alighted first, then deliberately feigned deference by walking beside him into the courtyard. As we approached the Fufeng courtyard housing the eldest son's quarters, his steps halted. Instead of heading toward the main hall, he turned toward the eastern wing where Consort Qin resided. I shall rest in Consort Qin's quarters tonight. His words carried a glint of testing and provocation in the corner of his eye as he glanced at me. Without lifting my eyelids, I gave a faint order to the maid beside me, "Go tell Aunt Qin to attend to the master properly." Watching his indifferent retreating figure, my heart remained utterly still. Leading the 2 children into the room, I spoke to them earnestly. "Did you both feel your father's attitude just now?" Xiao's eyes reddened as she nodded, fighting back tears. Seizure, still young, spoke with a trembling voice, "Auntie, does father not like us?" I gently stroked Seijure's hair, my tone gentle yet firm. "To a father, children are like flowers on brocade, to a mother, they are life itself." Precisely because they come too easily, they are hard to cherish. Your father has no shortage of women to bear him children. I looked into their two pairs of bewildered yet anxious eyes and said, word by word, in a man's heart, career and reputation will always outweigh the bonds of blood. What you must do is not beg for his pity, but become someone he cannot afford to ignore. You must bury your head in books. One day, your name will grace the imperial examination rolls, bringing glory to our family. Chiao, you must read widely, gaining wisdom and discernment. In time, you will choose a worthy husband, uphold our clan, and support your younger brother. When that day comes, you won't need to speak, he will hold you in the palm of his hand. I clasped their cool little hands, my voice as still as a deep pool. Remember, the strongest bond in this world is never blood, but value. If you become the pride of the Qin family, you will be as noble as any legitimate heir. If not, you will be nothing. These words might seem cruel to children, but for those born into a household of wealth and privilege, seeing reality early is no bad thing. Xiaojia suddenly threw herself into my arms, tears streaming down her face. What about our aunt? We're not your biological children. If we can't bring you value, will you abandon us too? I cupped her tear-stained little face, my gaze solemn as I met her eyes. I chose you not for exploitation, but for a promise. From this day forward, you are my responsibility, and my choice. Remember, if true heart requires conditions, it is no longer true. I protect you simply because you are you. After the two children were led away, I kept their wet nurse behind. Did you understand what I just said to sister and brother? I sat upright, my voice not loud but carrying an unmistakable authority. The two hurriedly knelt, repeatedly affirming their understanding. My gaze swept over their heads, my tone calm yet profound. The children are still young, they may not fully grasp the intricacies involved. But you are both women who have borne children. The meaning behind these words surely needs no further explanation from me. Silence filled the room for a moment. One wet nurse raised her hand to wipe away tears, her voice hoarse. Madam, your words are like pearls. To men, children are but easily obtained possessions. How can they compare to the bond forged by a mother carrying a child for 10 months, risking her very life? Another nurse's face also darkened with shared sorrow. Only when their emotions had somewhat settled did I speak solemnly. Given this, you must remember, the future of the eldest master and eldest miss is the very foundation upon which your own futures rest. Their well-being is inextricably linked to yours and your children's. I instructed them to pay close attention to the children's emotional states. At 10 years old, they crave their father's warmth and affection most. Yet Qinjian, unworthy as a husband, unfit as a father, has subjected his own flesh and blood to emotional neglect, merely to hold me hostage. Such behavior makes him unworthy of being a father. He deserves only to grow old in solitude. My final instruction to the wet nurse, beyond daily care, make the children understand, fatherly love that must be begged for is worthless. Placing genuine trust in someone unworthy is the greatest betrayal. Afterward, I had someone find my eldest sister's former bridal maid. Both bridesmaids, now only 28 or 29, already bore the marks of hardship. Sichuan wept as she recounted, the late mistress assigned me to serve Master Chen Ziliang. He nitpicks constantly, snubs me at the slightest provocation, and demands I grovel for forgiveness. Otherwise, he won't speak to me for months on end. Emotional abuse? Ha! Men. Su Shui wore a face of sorrow. My husband isn't so bad, but his mother is the capable matron who serves the old madam. Every time she returns from the old madam's quarters, she demands I attend her like a personal maid, finding fault at the slightest thing. And your husband? Does he just stand by and do nothing? Su Shui sighed, he's often away with the master. How could he possibly manage it? Besides, what can a son say when his mother-in-law bullies his wife? When the late mistress intervened, the master rebuked her, saying it was the mistress's right to discipline servants, but she had no authority over the servants' quarters or to interfere with the daughter-in-law's filial duties. He even said, if you wanted your maidservants to be precious, you shouldn't have married Chen Zipping in the first place. Humph, that scoundrel Chen Jian, he truly excels at wielding patriarchal authority to oppress others. When I inquired about my eldest sister's past with him, their fragmented recollections pieced together a picture. Chen Jian was demanding and stern, never smiling. My sister spent her days tending to him with utmost caution, met with cold stares at the slightest misstep, and routinely berated with, "Is this how the Gu family was raised?" Whenever my eldest sister protested in frustration, she faced even harsher rebukes. In the end, she could only swallow her pride, admit fault, and submit. This Chin fellow not only used ritual and propriety to tame women but also mastered the art of emotional abuse. A thoroughly despicable man. I immediately ordered, "Let Sichuan bring the child into the mansion to serve as Seizure Scholar's attendant. Sichuan herself shall remain at Fufeng Courtyard, never to return to that frigid home. Since her husband delights in taming his wife through emotional neglect, we shall employ his own tactics against him. Let's see who endures longer." As for Su Shui, since her mother-in-law so relishes her daughter-in-law's service, let Su Shui return and attend to her with utmost devotion. However, even maids serving their masters receive monthly wages. It makes no sense for a daughter-in-law's filial devotion to her mother-in-law to become unpaid labor. Naturally, I must approach her dear husband and reclaim this personal allowance. When the month's wages were distributed at month's end, the grand lady handed the 200 taels for the eldest branch to me, instructing me to allocate it. I immediately gave Chen Ziliang and Chen Ziping's wages to Su Wan and Su Shui. You manage his household, so naturally the money falls under your control. You fulfill his filial duties, so this hard-earned money rightfully belongs to you. Seeing hesitation on their faces, my expression instantly hardened. If you can't even control your own husbands, there's no need for you to remain by my side. I keep no useless people under my command. The wet nurse immediately stepped forward to lecture the two women sternly. After distributing the monthly allowances, the ledger showed only 2 taels remaining. Upon careful inspection, it became clear that Mrs. Li alone had spent 60 taels. I immediately summoned Chen Jian. He initially declined, so I brought in his capable aides, Chen Ziliang and Chen Ziping. I had them kneel on the cold stone floor while a maid methodically recited every single expense Li Shi had incurred. This deficit, naturally, must be covered by your master. If you object, speak up. How should I proceed? The 2 men remained prostrate, unable to speak. That evening, Chen Jian finally entered the main courtyard. Ignoring the children's forced composure as they bowed according to my prior instructions, he lashed out directly at me. Who would have thought the Gu family's daughter could be so unforgiving? Lady Li merely used medicine during her illness, yet you nitpick like this, truly vicious. He added bitterly, compared to your sister, you fall 1,000 miles short. I lifted my eyes, meeting his gaze without flinching, a cold curve playing at my lips. Since my lord brings up comparisons, I shall venture one myself. The scholar Zhou of the Hanlin Academy lives in perfect harmony with his wife, never allowing his concubines to outspend the main consort. The heir to the Yongchang Marquis personally managed his wife's dowry, multiplying its value several times over. My tone shifted abruptly, sharp as a blade. Now look at you, my lord. The household accounts are a complete mess. You favor concubines over your wife, mistreating your legitimate son and daughter. You lack the virtue to govern your household, the strength to defend your nation. Beyond using the word upbringing to suppress your lawful wife, what else can you do? Compared to that upright gentleman others speak of, how far you fall short is more than a mere fraction. I shot him a sidelong glance, striking again before he could gather his thoughts. If my elder sister was so admirable, why did I never see you smile at her once while she lived? A hypocrite like you, who holds others to standards you won't apply to yourself, what right do you have to judge me? He seemed struck dumb, his finger trembling wildly as he pointed at me. His face flushed crimson, yet not a single word of rebuttal escaped him. If you can't afford to keep a concubine, sell her off promptly. My voice dripped with icy scorn. Or do you expect me, your lawful wife, to use my dowry to support her? Though reeling from this barrage of verbal blows, he still possessed some cunning. Suppressing his rage, he ground out through clenched teeth, "You dare defy your husband? Gu sure, you're quite something. This is the Gu family's upbringing." I turned my head away from his gaze, a faint, cold laugh escaping my lips. However poor my family's upbringing may be, we would never favor a concubine over the wife as you do, master. You, who constantly quote the sages, yet act worse than common merchants, at least they know to wear a hat that fits their head. He flung his sleeves wide, his unspent fury burning within him as he stormed off. I turned to the two children frozen in place, softening my voice yet speaking with crystal clarity. Did you understand every word just now? Should anyone ever again use rules or upbringing to oppress or manipulate you, do you know how to respond? The siblings bit their lower lips, eyes reddening, yet nodded firmly. Xiaojia stepped forward, lifting her tear-stained face and asked in a trembling voice, Auntie, how exactly did my mother die? I didn't wish to plant hatred in the children's hearts, yet I could not sugarcoat the truth. I crouched down, meeting their eyes levelly, and spoke solemnly, Your mother was the gentlest soul in this world. She served her in-laws with filial devotion, raised her children with care, and attended to her husband with unwavering diligence, never once slacking in her duties. Yet your father never cherished her devotion. He constantly berated her with rules, criticized her manners, and bound her words and actions with invisible chains, crushing her spirit. Day after day, he broke her heart. Until she died of grief. Seeing the pain and resentment welling in their eyes, I gently placed my hand on their shoulders, my voice calm yet firm, but you must also understand that your father was not purely evil. He merely employed the customary methods of this grand household. It was your mother who placed too much importance on reputation and affection, trapped in the need to prove herself, that she gradually walked into this predicament. Remember today's pain, but remember today's lesson even more. When someone accuses you, if you are without fault, do not waste your energy defending yourself. If they seek to oppress you, there is no need to prove your innocence. True dignity in this world is never about conforming to others' rules, but about living according to the compass within your own heart. As long as the concubines behave themselves, I shall treat them kindly. I often summon them to bring their children to my courtyard for lessons in reading and writing, and to teach them proper etiquette. The Qin family has its own private academy, where the children attend daily. Upon their return, I test their studies. Those who answer well receive rewards, those who falter are gently encouraged. I thoroughly reviewed every aspect of Fufeng courtyard, dismissing any who were dishonest or lazy. My courtyard requires few servants, but those who remain must be fully under my control. The concubines' quarters were renovated, and new garments were made for the children born to them. Naturally, the month-end accounts grew increasingly grim. I picked up the ledger once more and ordered someone to fetch Chen Jian. He still couldn't put on airs, so I summoned Chen Ziliang and Chen Zipping. I made them kneel on the cold blue stone tiles while I read aloud every single expense of the main branch, line by line. Only when their knees went numb and their necks grew stiff did I allow them to carry the ledger to find Chen Jian. This time, Chen Jian showed some improvement. Though his face was as cold as ice, he restrained his anger and confronted me. Is 200 taels of silver not enough for your spending? When your sister managed the household years ago, I never faced a shortage. Yet you, not only do you embezzle, but you demand I subsidize you. What a fine talent you possess. I raised an eyebrow, my tone tinged with schadenfreude. My sister was so virtuous, yet you never cherished her. He erupted in fury. She died of illness. Her body was useless. What fault is that of mine? My sister was healthy when she lived with our mother. She died within 10 years of marrying you. Could it be your ill fortune brought her down? I took a light step back. Please keep your distance. I fear I might follow her path. Gu sure. Yu veins bulged on his temples, yet he forced himself to calm. Humph. The deputy minister of the Supreme Court's composure is indeed formidable. He took a deep breath and flung the ledger at me. Your sister never once asked me for money while she lived. In virtue, you fall short of her. In managing the household, you fall even further. I scoffed. Has the master gone blind? Every single coin here was spent on your concubine and your children. If you crave pleasure below the waist, you must pay the price. A man who reads the classics surely wouldn't exploit his concubine's body without providing her with clothes and food. They bore you sons and daughters. For the sake of those children, you couldn't treat them harshly. The Qin family is, after all, a distinguished lineage. You couldn't let your illegitimate children go out in rags, bringing shame upon the Qin name, could you? I've disciplined your concubine's children without demanding compensation. What else would I gain? I met his gaze and declared, word by word, having become your wife and cared for your concubine's children, I've endured hardship. Henceforth, I must receive 50 taels of silver monthly. If insufficient, you must make up the difference. If you cannot, I smiled faintly, then you'll have to make do, my lord. Qin Jian had indeed improved. Even in his fury, he countered, since you have nothing better to do, perhaps you could reduce the number of servants. I readily agreed, excellent. Effective immediately, the number of servants in the Fufeng courtyard will be reduced by 30%. Expenses for the master's study will also be cut by 30%. Furthermore, the concubines in the house who have not borne children should all be sold off. When the master's finances improve, he may take new ones then. He flew into a rage, accusing me of being unkind and jealous. He declared that wives everywhere sacrifice themselves for their husbands, yet I alone made him suffer. I calmly retorted, that's because you lack the ability, my lord. Wives elsewhere wear gold and silver, surrounded by servants like clouds. Yet you alone force your wife to scrimp and save, all to indulge your own harem. Master Qin Jian's study of the sages, truly profound and uniquely interpreted. Qin Jian nearly toppled backward in fury, while I felt utterly exhilarated. In the end, he stormed out once more, leaving only a chill silence behind. This time, Qin Jian stood his ground and refused to compensate me with silver. Naturally, I felt no resentment. After he left for the magistrate's office, I went straight to the outer study. The 4 servants stationed there, 2 young attendants and 2 maids, were sold off on the spot. Qin Ziliang had followed Qin Jian to the magistrate's office, leaving Qin Zipping behind. I gave him a thorough dressing down. I hear your mother requires your wife to tend to her all night long? Seated upright in my chair, I slowly stirred the tea foam. Since Lady Zhu is a trusted servant to the dowager, her retention is a favor from the household. Yet you, as her son, have entirely shifted the care of your ailing mother onto your wife while shirking your own responsibilities. Is this your notion of filial piety? Qin Zipping suppressed his anger, his voice low. Madam has already given Su Shui her monthly allowance as compensation for her hard work. I lifted my gaze, a faint smile playing on my lips. Since you mention money, then I must ask, Su Shui has served your mother for nearly 10 years. As her husband, have you ever given her a single coin of your own? Has your mother, who has received a decade of filial devotion from her daughter-in-law, ever bestowed even a token of gratitude? His hands trembled slightly. After a long pause, he stammered, a daughter-in-law serving her mother-in-law is only natural. How noble! I chuckled softly, my gaze turning icy. The classics speak of a mother's kindness and a daughter's filial piety, not a mother-in-law's harshness and a daughter-in-law's endurance. Since your mother has enjoyed her daughter-in-law's devotion, she ought to show kindness in return. As her husband, you should show consideration. What? Having studied the sage's writings alongside your master, have you learned only to demand one-sided sacrifice from your wife? Qin Zipping's brow glistened with sweat. Finally, he bowed his head and said, I understand. I shall treat her well from now on and never make her bear the burden alone. Seeing he understood his place, I knew when to stop. I turned and headed for Lady Li's eastern courtyard. Under the pretext that Qin Jian was strapped for cash and couldn't afford idle hands, I had all the servants in her courtyard sold off. The search uncovered over 1,000 taels in hidden silver notes and a full chest of gold and silver jewelry. The laws of our dynasty forbid concubines from holding private property. I ordered calmly that everything be confiscated. Madame Li wailed and screamed, demanding that the master return to settle the matter. I eyed her coldly. The household funds cannot sustain such extravagance. You have neither borne children nor served the mistress, yet you are constantly plagued by illness. What use are you? You should have been sold outright. Out of respect for the master, you are demoted to a concubine. A concubine's monthly allowance is 2 taels, plus clothing, jewelry, and 4 servants, at least 20 taels monthly. Remove 1 concubine, and that silver is saved. After leaving the magistrate's office, Qin Jian heard of this matter. Unprecedentedly, he did not come looking for me, merely assigning Li Shi to serve in the outer study. The next day, Su Shui reported with a beaming face, last night, the mistress did not require me to keep vigil. I finally slept through the night. I sneered inwardly, after being oppressed for so long, she couldn't even stand up for herself anymore. If you belittle yourself, others will belittle you. Remember this, it wasn't them who gave you stability, but me who taught them how to treat you. The commotion I caused naturally didn't escape my in-laws' notice. Though annoyed that I wasn't sufficiently docile and virtuous, they dared not openly blame me. After all, their son had erred first. But what parents in this world do not scheme for their son? Unable to openly pressure me, they began manipulating things behind the scenes. This month, the silver allowance for the eldest branch was cut directly from 200 taels to 100. The grand lady explained in a calm tone, according to old custom, these 200 taels originally included expenses for Jian'er's outer quarters. Now that his portion has been separated, the expenses for Fufeng courtyard should naturally be halved. I lowered my gaze. So this was waiting for me. Ah, the way respectable people deal with others is indeed so respectable. Without flinching, I praised the grand lady for her fairness, then turned and headed straight for Chen Jian's study. Chen Ziliang and Chen Ziping, spotting me approaching from afar, both shuddered visibly, shrinking their necks without daring to intervene. Inside the study, Lady Li was nestled beside Chen Jian, grinding ink. Upon my entrance, Chen Jian not only failed to withdraw but drew Lady Li closer into his embrace, openly flirting before my eyes. I settled into my seat, watching this spectacle with quiet amusement. Chen Jian was the first to lose his composure. Pushing Li Shi away, he smoothed his robes and asked coldly, "What is it?" I relayed the lady's words to him. He set down his brush with deliberate slowness. That was my intention. Since the lady is not adept at managing the household, it would be better to entrust the finances to me. I nodded. Does the master recall that he has a concubine and children? A mere 100 taels, do you truly believe that will suffice to support an entire household? That is a matter for the mistress to consider. He even chuckled lightly. If the mistress finds herself unable to manage, she may always step aside. So this was their plan, mother and son joining forces to impose financial sanctions upon me. I couldn't be bothered to argue further. Turning, I went straight to my in-law's courtyard and knelt directly on the cold stone floor. Your humble daughter-in-law is foolish indeed, unaware that the Chen household has fallen into such hardship that even the expenses for wife and children must be curtailed and economized. Since this is the case, your humble daughter-in-law dares not burden the Chen family any longer. I beg your permission to leave the household, thus preserving the Chen family's dignity. The teacup in the matriarch's hand clattered onto the stone floor, shattering into fragments that splattered with tea. She never imagined I would strike back with such utter resolve. You. What did you say? The matriarch's voice trembled, while the father-in-law beside her abruptly stood up. I remained kneeling straight, lowering my gaze to speak clearly. Since the Chen family has fallen so low that it must skimp on the expenses of its wife and children to maintain appearances, how could this daughter-in-law dare to remain a burden? It is better to request my own divorce, preserving the Chen family's good name and my own dignity. Nonsense. The eunuch's face darkened. The union between the Gu and Chen families is no trivial matter. Precisely because it is not trivial that this daughter-in-law must not cause further hardship for the Chen household. I lifted my head, meeting their shocked and angry gazes with calm eyes. Supporting the entire main branch, including all the concubines and their children, while maintaining the Chen family's dignity with a mere 100 taels of silver is no easy feat. If my incompetence led to children in shabby clothes, concubines in resentment, or outsiders criticizing the Chen family for stinginess, that would be my true failure. With a single, measured phrase, I returned the accusation of stinginess in kind. The matriarch's face drained of color. She knew better than anyone that if I were forced from the family for being unaffordable, the entire Chen household would become a laughingstock in the capital. The family's reputation for scholarly virtue would be utterly destroyed. You may rise. The matriarch's tone softened. This matter shall be discussed later. Mother, please understand. I remained kneeling, my voice growing clearer. It is not that your daughter-in-law refuses to postpone this matter, but today's servants in the household were already whispering that the eldest branch's allowance has been drastically reduced. I fear it may not last many more days. Rumors spread like wildfire. Your daughter-in-law fears they may tarnish the Chen family's reputation and must make a decision sooner rather than later. I uttered the word reputation softly, watching their expressions freeze abruptly. They used propriety and decorum to pressure me, so I used that very propriety and decorum to turn the tables on them. Finally, the grand lady took a deep breath, her words almost gritted out. Mother was short-sighted. The allowance shall remain at 200 taels. You may manage it with peace of mind. Only then did I slowly rise, brush my skirt, and bow respectfully. Your daughter-in-law obeys. I shall not betray your trust, mother. I will ensure everyone sees that the eldest branch of the Qin family retains every shred of dignity. As I turned to leave, I heard the matriarch slump back into her seat with a near collapse. Returning to Fufeng Courtyard, the wet nurse hurried to greet me. I offered a calm smile. See that word is given. Tomorrow's monthly allowance shall be distributed as usual. My gaze swept over the concubines and children, my voice calm yet firm. These past days, I have never deliberately hidden the truth between your father and me from you. If you have hearts, you will understand, what I fight for is not personal gain, but the dignity and rights you deserve. Aunt Qin wiped her tears first, her voice choked with emotion. Madam, we all remember your kindness. Without your planning, how could we have this peace today? Aunt Zhou nodded in agreement, adding that though the late mistress hadn't treated them harshly, they had lived in constant fear, nothing like the ease and comfort they enjoyed now. The children bowed their heads in sincere gratitude. The eldest, Zhu Guer, declared solemnly, Mother has treated us with utmost sincerity. Your son shall never disappoint your expectations. Xiaojie clasped my hand tightly, tears glistening. From this day forward, you are my mother. My heart swelled with satisfaction. Over the past half-year, I had often taken them to visit other households, letting them witness firsthand the lives of children deprived of their mother's protection. Within the capital, mistresses who mistreated their concubines and suppressed their illegitimate sons were a dime a dozen. Without comparison, one cannot appreciate what they have. Any sensible person should understand, rather than fawning over a cold-hearted father like Qin Jian, it's wiser to cling to the leg of a legitimate mother like me. Hu concubine was the sole exception. Relying on her son Pian's sharp wit, which won the favor of his grandparents, she devoted herself to climbing Qin Jian's coattails. Little did she know that every child under 6 is endearing. Once that sharp wit fades, they inevitably return to ordinary. Fearing I'd take her son and drive a wedge between them, Madame Hu insisted on raising Piandra herself. I never forced anyone. I continued to provide his allowance as before, but I no longer inquired about him daily as I did with the other children. After half a year, the gap between Pian and the other children became stark. His clothes and mannerisms betrayed a petty, small-mindedness. He was timid and fearful, yet carried an air of spoiled indulgence. At the year-end reunion banquet, Su and Zhu behaved with grace and poise. Even 7-year-old Jian was lively and bright. Yet little Pian, not yet 4, at an age when children should be most endearing, disappointed with his timidity. At the banquet, the children of the eldest branch chattered incessantly around me, while consorts Qin and Zhou showed deference laced with intimacy. Only Qin Jian sat at the head of the table, ignored by all. Auntie Hu served him diligently, but her coquettish glances were wasted on a blind man. She pushed little Pian toward Qin Jian to be held, but the child squirmed in his arms, his attention already drawn to the faint crackling of firecrackers outside the window. Master, why not take the children to see the fireworks? I spoke softly. Won't the mistress be joining us? Qin Jian looked up. I lowered my gaze and sipped my tea. Modern fireworks had long lost their charm. Why join the crowd? They were meant for the children anyway. I set down my teacup, my tone detached. The master may go as he pleases. The allegiance of hearts is never won by force. When you become their source of strength, they will naturally make the wisest choice. After washing up, I found Qin Jian still in the room. Is there something else, master? I raised an eyebrow. His expression shifted uncomfortably. After a long pause, he said, Chen Ziping asked me to convey this. Suwan is his wife, after all. Keeping her confined by your side for 3 months without allowing reunion is unreasonable. I couldn't help but chuckle softly. Chen Ziping's patience truly followed Qin Jian's teachings. He'd held it in until New Year's Eve before acting. Have I ever confined Suwan? I asked calmly. She herself refuses to return. Qin Jian, of course, didn't believe it. Even Chen Ziping, waiting outside the second gate, knelt down, pleading earnestly for the couple's reunion. I ordered someone to summon Suwan. She was busy with the year-end inventory of the storeroom, wearing a dust-covered headscarf and dressed plainly. Seeing her husband kneeling on the ground, she didn't even flinch. She knelt directly before me. This servant does not wish to return. Chinzipping grew frantic, his eyes pleadingly fixed on me. I lowered my gaze and sipped my tea. It is not I who stands in the way. Suwon is convinced, you are not her rightful husband. How could that be? Chinzipping argued. I've been handing over my monthly salary to her these past few months. Shouldn't you? I set down my teacup, my gaze sweeping over his rich robes before settling on Suwon's neat, though plain, attire. When she lived in your household, she was haggard and worn. Now she's vibrant and radiant. Tell me, is it that you bring her fortune, or that you bring her misfortune? Chinzipping fell silent, hastily turning to Qinjian. Qinjian spoke in a deep voice, Suwon is, after all, his wife. The marriage was arranged by your eldest sister. How can you justify your actions to her? My sister? I sneered coldly. My sister arranged the marriage hoping for her happiness. But Chinzipping, how did you treat her? Constantly giving her the cold shoulder, forcing her to submit, gradually molding her into the dutiful and virtuous image you desired. My gaze turned to Qinjian, sharp as a blade. These tactics are remarkably similar to yours. Chinzipping kowtowed repeatedly, protesting his innocence. Qinjian's face turned ashen. Better to demolish 10 temples than ruin one marriage. You're creating a couple doomed to misery. I looked at Suwon, who had kept her head bowed the entire time. Suwon, tell him how these past 6 months have been. Suwon slowly raised her head, meeting Chinzipping's gaze for the first time. Her voice was quiet but every word was clear. These past 6 months, since I married, have been the most human I've ever felt. Tears welled in her eyes, yet her gaze held an unyielding resolve, no longer needing to read others' expressions, no longer fearing a wrong word will bring cold stares, no longer spending nights wondering what I did wrong. Such a life I no longer wish to live. Not even in death. Qinjian's breath caught. I watched silently as his expression darkened, then spoke slowly, one tragedy like my sister's in the Qin family is enough. I will never let Suwon walk that same path. Chinzipping, rise. Today, I make the decision, I grant you permission to live apart. In ancient times, divorce was rarely granted lightly, whether for the sake of children or reputation. But living apart as husband and wife was permissible. Suwon remained unmoved. No matter how desperately Chinzipping pleaded, she refused to return with him. Kneeling on the floor, Chinzipping dared not confront her directly. Instead, he turned to Qinjian with pleading eyes. Qinjian clenched his fists, yet for the first time, he didn't invoke the rules of propriety to pressure me. He merely dismissed Chinzipping and sent away the servants in the room. Once we were alone, he sat silently on the kong, his gaze drifting over my face with a complex expression. I sipped my tea calmly. If he wished to continue this cold war, I would see it through to the end. True to his upbringing as the Qin family's carefully cultivated eldest son, he handled my elder sister, a proper, rule-abiding young lady of noble birth, with effortless ease. Too bad I'm not my elder sister. I'm a full-time housewife who fought her way out of a modern tycoon's family. My specialty lies in carving out my rights amid the cracks. After a stick of incense burned, he finally couldn't contain himself and stormed out. See him out, master. I called out. Nanny, close the door. The year-end rush was upon us, and every household bustled with activity. On New Year's Day, the Grand Dowager would enter the palace for the New Year's tribute. By custom, Qinjian, a 4th-rank official, should have his second wife granted the 5th-rank title of noble consort. But no one in the Qin household mentioned it, and I was quite content to keep things quiet, saving me the trouble of fawning over those noblemen first thing in the morning. As night fell, the Qin family returned from the palace, each looking weary. Qinjian had drunk wine, his cheeks flushed, and the look in his eyes when he saw me was different from usual. After perfunctorily attending to the grand lady for a short while, I accompanied Qinjian back to the Fufeng courtyard. Seeing he showed no intention of leaving, still clad in his ceremonial robes, I gently reminded him, Master, these court garments are cumbersome. Perhaps the concubines could assist you in changing. I clearly saw him clench his jaw, suppressing his anger. Unnecessary. I'll change right here. His gaze fixed on me as he spoke. I feigned confusion and summoned a maid to attend him. He stiffly spread his arms, allowing the maid to remove his robes. Alas, I had no spare garments for him here, so he sat on the kong wearing only his undergarments. I busied myself washing my hands and face, removing my hairpins and ornaments. He finally couldn't contain himself. Today I petitioned the Ministry of Rights to grant you an imperial decree of honor. My hand paused slightly as I removed my earrings, offering no reply. His voice rose sharply. I petitioned for your honor, and you show no reaction? Is this not within your duties, my lord? I turned to look at him. I manage the children and household affairs for you, freeing you from all worries. Should I not deserve this honor? Still, I must thank you, my lord. After more than half a year of marriage, you've finally remembered to petition for my title. He hadn't expected my coldness. Are you displeased? Of course I'm pleased. Thank you, my lord. I offered a faint smile. Considering he'd taken the initiative, I instructed the maid, attend to my lord's ablutions. Then fetch 2 sets of his everyday robes from Auntie Hu's quarters. Qin Jian's expression softened slightly as the maid attended to him. The imperial decree will arrive shortly, he said. Prepare yourself well. My enthusiasm waned. It's merely a 5th-rank noble consort title. Why must the edict be delivered personally? It is 4th rank. He fixed his gaze on me, emphasizing each syllable. A full 4th-rank noble consort. Only then did genuine surprise wash over me. For a secondary wife to receive a 4th-rank noble consort title was exceedingly rare, and the annual stipend for a 4th-rank title far exceeded that of a 5th rank. For the sake of the silver, my smile grew a bit more genuine. Thank you, my lord. I then instructed the maid, go fetch 2 more sets of bedding from the outer study. In this bitter cold, I couldn't bear to let him sleep on the single bed and catch a chill. I didn't mind being a widow, but the children couldn't be without their father's support. So we slept in the same bed, each under our own quilt. After the lamp was extinguished, I had just turned my back to him when a hand reached out. I slapped it away. Sir, please restrain yourself. I thought we could remain as distant as ice forever. His suppressed voice came from the darkness. Since we are husband and wife, performing the rites of Zhou is only natural. Want the truth? He fell silent for a moment, then sighed deeply. I was wrong before. But considering I secured your imperial decree. Impossible. I cut him off. I refuse to bear children, and I won't take those harmful abortion potions. I'm selfish, I only love myself. To me, your children are merely the duty of a Qin family wife. Since I eat the Qin family's food, I won't shirk my duties. But beyond that? Let's just leave it at that. Do you know that serving one's husband is also a wife's duty? I sat up with a cold laugh. Since you wish to discuss duties, let's settle this properly. My eldest sister married you, bore your children, managed the household, and even sacrificed her life. Was that not fulfilling her duty? The more I spoke, the more my indignation boiled. I could have married into a family of equal standing as a primary wife. Why did I come here to be a secondary wife, forever beneath you? Your Qin family already ruined the Gu family's legitimate daughter. Now you seek to trample me too? The humiliation on our wedding night, 6 months of cold neglect, Qin Jian, do you think a simple I know I was wrong can erase it? Don't think you can treat me the way you treated my sister. I won't be like her, enduring humiliation for empty prestige, slowly crushed by your daily emotional abuse until I lose myself, becoming a puppet you manipulate at will. I advise you, master, not to be too greedy. You already have both sons and daughters, you don't need the child in my womb. With 3 concubines at your disposal, seek them out instead of defiling my space. In the darkness, only his heavy breathing could be heard. After a long while, he rose angrily and slammed the door behind him. I lay back down, tucking the quilt around me. Marriage is never salvation in times of hardship, but rather the freedom to add splendor to splendor. If we cannot support each other through thick and thin, then let us respect each other with icy detachment. In these grand mansions, the most crucial lesson for women isn't how to please men, but how to please themselves. For the old master's birthday, the Qin residence was adorned with lanterns and decorations, guests filling the halls. I moved among the visitors, conversing with ease and grace, observing every courtesy. Several ladies familiar with the Chen family exchanged subtle glances, clearly surprised that this secondary wife possessed such poise. Just as the banquet reached its height, a commotion erupted from the side hall. I walked over slowly to find the legitimate grandson of the Yongchang Marquis pointing his finger at Zhu Gu'er's nose, shouting, "How dare a bastard sit at the same table as me?" Zhu Gu'er clenched his fists, his eyes reddening, yet stubbornly pressed his lips together. I gently placed my hand on Zhu Gu'er's shoulder and asked softly, "What happened?" It turned out the legitimate grandson had deliberately knocked over the pastries, then falsely accused Zhu Gu'er of bumping into him. The other children present, intimidated by the legitimate grandson's status, dared not testify. Qin Jian, however, without hearing the full story, ordered Zhu Gu'er to apologize to the other boy. I watched Zhu Gu'er's stubborn little face, the tears welling up in his eyes, and patted his head to comfort him. I turned to the Duchess of Yongchang, a smile playing on my lips, yet my gaze remained cool and clear. The Duke's household is known for its strict upbringing. I trust the young master would not lie. However, with so many guests present today, it would be best to retrieve the banquet records and question the maids who served at the table. The legitimate grandson immediately grew flustered. The Duchess of Yongchang's expression shifted slightly as she forced a smile to smooth things over. "Children playing in roughhousing, there's no need to take it so seriously." "Children's matters need not be taken too seriously," I replied, my smile unchanged. Yet character and upbringing demand no such leniency. Though the Qin family may not rival the Marquisate prestige, we cannot tolerate our offspring suffering unjust humiliation. I lowered my gaze to Zhu Gu'er. "Would you be willing to shake hands and make peace with this young master?" Zhu Gu'er looked at me, his eyes flickering with both light and hesitation. I smiled encouragingly at him. "Speak your mind bravely. Mother won't blame you. I know our Zhu Gu'er has never been arrogant or overbearing. Just stay true to yourself." Gathering his courage, Zhu Gu'er declared loudly, "I refuse to shake hands with someone who insults me by name." "How dare you!" Qin Jian's sharp rebuke drew my gaze, causing him to avert his eyes. I stroked Zhuge's head gently and said softly, "Good. At such a young age, our Zhuge already knows right from wrong. Mother is very pleased." The Duchess of Yongchang, unable to bear the shame, pressed her grandson to apologize to Zhuge. Holding Zhuge's hand, I smiled faintly, "Madam, there's no need to force the child. My Zhuge no longer cares." Zhu Gu'er hugged me tightly, his voice sweet as honey. "Thank you, mother." Qin Jian watched the affection his son showed me, his lips parting before finally settling into a sigh. That very night, he personally brought a jade hairpin to my chambers. "Today's events were my fault. Thank you for standing up for Zhu Gu'er." He pushed the jade hairpin toward me. "This hairpin suits you well." I glanced at it and replied calmly, "Master, you flatter me. Protecting a child's dignity and honor is simply my duty as his legitimate mother." He gazed at the spirit in my eyes as I spoke, a strange light flickering within his own. Over the next few days, he found various excuses to visit my courtyard, sometimes bearing novel trinkets, other times inquiring about the children's studies. Everyone in the courtyard rejoiced for me. Yet I summoned Su Shui, who always walked with purpose, to my side. "Now that your mother-in-law has ceased tormenting you and Chen Ziliang has learned to respect you, do you think all is well?" Su Shui's smile stiffened. "Don't be so naive." I lowered my gaze, fingering the teacup. "They merely fear my presence. If I were to disappear one day, could you still stand your ground?" "Madam will surely live 100 years. Su Shui protested urgently. "With your protection. I won't remain in the Chen household much longer," I cut her off. "This is not my home. Make your plans early." After Su Shui retreated, dazed and disoriented, the wet nurse voiced her concern. "Madam, what did you mean by that earlier?" "Exactly what I said," I replied calmly. "Once the children are grown, I shall divorce Qin Jian. I'll use my dowry to buy a house. No more serving in-laws, no more dealing with unpleasant people. Wouldn't that be delightful?" The wet nurse protested urgently, "But the master is changing. He truly cares for you now. Late affection is worth less than weeds," I scoffed. "I have no use for it." Before I could finish, Qin Jian staggered out from behind a pillar, his face deathly pale. You want a divorce?" His voice trembled. If I hadn't betrayed you on our wedding night, if I'd treated you well all along, would you still leave? Perhaps. He staggered backward, as if drained of all strength, and finally slumped away. The wet nurse couldn't bear it. The young master has already realized his mistake. Why not give him another chance? A woman's misfortune begins when she pities a man. I watched him disappear, a faint smile playing on my lips. He was merely unwilling to accept defeat, a favored son of heaven, thwarted within the inner chambers. Once he becomes intoxicated with power, new delights will naturally present themselves. As for me, I have never been anyone's appendage, nor must I pay for anyone's remorse. Invited to the Minister of Personnel's wife's flower viewing banquet, the hostess proposed archery as entertainment. Though utterly clueless about the game, I showed no hesitation, calmly seeking guidance from the Lady Wang seated beside me, wife of the left censoring chief of the Board of Censors. Impressed by my earnestness, she patiently instructed me. I studied diligently, and within moments, my throws began to take shape. Sister, you truly master this art. With your guidance, even someone as slow-witted as I has grasped it. I smiled as I offered her hot tea, my words making her beam with delight. Through this shared interest in archery, we conversed warmly, discussing everything from archery techniques to raising children, finding ourselves remarkably compatible. As we parted, we rode home together in the same carriage, agreeing to stay in touch. Through Lady Wang, I gradually established connections within the capital's circle of officials' families. At every banquet, I brought the children along, broadening their horizons and allowing them to befriend peers from prominent families. Amidst these social engagements, I paid close attention, meticulously noting every official rumor and family secret I overheard. Back at the mansion, I compiled these into a notebook and handed it to Qinjian. The Minister of Personnel and the Vice Minister of Revenue have been meeting frequently lately. The marriage alliance between the Yongchang Marquis household and the Prince of N's household may face unexpected changes. Qinjian was initially surprised, but his expression grew increasingly solemn as he studied the notes carefully. These insights gave him a decisive edge in court, allowing him to dodge several open and covert attacks while earning commendations from his superiors on multiple occasions. His attitude toward me gradually changed. From the initial icy formality to the current polite deference. He often sends me jewelry and fabrics, and has even begun inquiring about the children's poetry and studies. Children aged 7 or 8 to 10 are precisely at the age when they crave their father's affection. Seeing their father's sudden concern, each of them is overwhelmed with surprise and delight, their eyes brimming with childish adoration. Watching them gather joyfully around Qinjian, I sneered inwardly, this man certainly knows how to reap the rewards. Privately, I continued to instill a lesson in the children, blood ties may bind, but true worth lies in one's abilities. Your father values you because he recognizes your worth. It's natural to seek his favor, he holds the family's resources. But never neglect the necessary cunning. I also made the two concubines understand, while pleasing men is crucial, the true masters of their destinies are the matriarchs who whisper in their ears. Whenever I sought resources for the children, I deliberately did so in their presence. Master, Zhuge's tutor says his writing has improved greatly. Might we hire a martial arts instructor as well? Sons of noble families should excel in both scholarship and martial arts. Xiaoer's needlework requires a master from the south. She must master these skills to manage a household after marriage. Seeing how I constantly considered the children's needs, Qinjian readily agreed. To the children, however, all these benefits came solely from their legitimate mother's efforts. Reality is often cruel, a man's affection for his children largely depends on the standing of their mother. Now the children treat me with more respect than they ever showed Qinjian. Qinjian began visiting my quarters more frequently. Initially, he came under the pretense of reviewing the children's studies or discussing official matters. Later, he simply stayed overnight. As his belongings gradually filled the room, I gently stroked my new jade bracelet, a faint smile touching my lips. This tender offensive, is it not another form of calculation? He believes he advances step by step, unaware that I, too, am taming him in reverse. At the mid-autumn banquet, candlelight filled the room. Qinjian, accompanied by Chen Ziping and Chen Ziliang, knelt before me once more, pleading for Su Wan and Su Shui to return to the family. Over the past year, Su Wan and Su Shui had transformed beyond recognition. Under my guidance, they had grown into capable individuals, becoming indispensable pillars of my support. Their wet nurse had remarked more than once, these two never displayed such talent when they were with the late mistress. A strong commander has no weak soldiers. Later, I reflected that it must have been their desperate marriages that drove them to strive so hard. I granted them considerable authority. Even Chen Ziping and Chen Ziliang, Chen Jian's foremost retainers, paled in comparison to them. These two men, however, were shrewd. Seeing their wives grow ever more influential, even their master appearing diminished before me, they seized the opportunity of the mid-autumn banquet to kneel and plead. "Please, madam, grant us your forgiveness. We know we were wrong," they declared in unison. Chen Jian chimed in from the side, even invoking classical texts to plead their case. I instructed my servants, "Bring the young ladies and gentlemen here." Chen Jian hurriedly protested, "It's merely the servants' private affair. Why disturb the children?" A faint smile touched my lips. "Master, you may not realize it, but the art of marital harmony and the wisdom to discern the world's ways are both subjects worthy of study." Moreover, my gaze swept over him. Xiao Jie is growing up. It's better for her to witness the baser instincts of men early on than to face a future like my elder sisters, living in constant fear and walking on eggshells under her in-law's oppression. The words struck him hard. Chen Jian's face darkened, his fist clenching and unclenching before he finally conceded bitterly, "You are right, madam. I have indeed treated your elder sister unfairly." The children filed in one by one and took their seats. Sujuan and Sushue arrived too, kneeling before me and insisting they refused to return. Sujuan wept as she pleaded, "Back home, there's endless housework, never-ending laundry, and enduring my husband's constant criticism and fault-finding. He treats me with cold indifference at the slightest provocation, refusing even household expenses. As a weak woman, I must manage the household and raise the children alone. Without money, I can't take a single step. Such a life is suffocatingly oppressive. Serving Lady de Tai, I need only focus on my duties to earn dignity and respect. My children have a future, and I no longer must live at others' mercy." Chen Ziping kowtowed repeatedly, swearing by heaven and earth that he understood his wrongdoing and would treat her well. But Su Wan remained resolutely unwilling to return. I turned to Chen Ziping and fired 3 questions at him. "I hear that whenever Su Wan did anything to displease you, you turned cold toward her and even withheld household funds. Do you remember that you have not only a wife but also 2 children? By withholding funds, did you intend to starve them to death? In the year since Su Wan entered this household, have you ever shown her a shred of concern? Have you ever inquired about the children? You knew full well that your wife and children couldn't survive without you. You knew Su Wan would eventually yield to you for the children's sake. So you intensified your oppression of her, pushing her to the brink of complete submission, am I right?" With each question I posed, the children's eyes turned in unison toward Chen Jian. Chen Jian froze in place, his face alternating between pale and ashen, averting his eyes guiltily. Chen Ziping stammered, denying it with his words, yet his kowtowing betrayed his unease. Su Wan's wavering expression hardened once more after hearing these words. I pressed my advantage. "It's one thing to mimic your master's ways, but you should never, ever use your own flesh and blood to manipulate your lawful wife. Even if your master lost his wife and children, he could still remarry. But you, a mere servant, if you mistreat your wife and children to death, you'll spend the rest of your life alone and miserable." The last vestiges of childish affection in the children's gazes toward Chen Jian vanished completely. Chen Jian opened his mouth, then bowed his head in shame. Su Wan felt a chill in her heart at his words, her eyes now only cold toward Chen Ziping. Seeing this, Chen Ziliang hurried forward on his knees. "Madam, you see clearly. I am not like Ziping. I have never treated Sushue that way." "Sushue, is this true?" Sushue pondered for a moment, a flicker of relief crossing her face. Compared to Chen Ziping, Ziliang was indeed much kinder. I chuckled softly. "Compared to Chen Ziping, your husband is indeed slightly better. But why, after marrying him for so many years, do you still look so haggard and worn? Is it that he brings you misfortune, or that he fails to bring you prosperity?" Sushue was momentarily speechless. Chen Ziliang hastily defended, "It's because she's been burning the midnight oil tending to my mother all these years." Once Sushiro returns, she won't need to serve mother anymore. Oh. I raised an eyebrow. Why didn't you have this insight before? Qin Ziliang was rendered speechless. Qin Jian couldn't help but interject, a daughter-in-law tending to her mother-in-law is only natural, it's filial piety. As the mistress of the house, how can you interfere? I retorted with a cold laugh. Su Shui served old lady Zhu for a full decade, only to gain a body riddled with illness and a soul worn by hardship. Does such filial piety seem fair to you, master? Filial piety should not be one-sided sacrifice, but mutual understanding born of empathy. If one fails to grasp even this basic principle, all the Confucian texts in the world are wasted. The grand lady once tried to impose rules upon me. However, she tormented me. I retaliated by targeting those close to her. When she made things difficult, I served her with extra diligence until late at night. Then, claiming aching limbs that required acupuncture from the physician, I presented prescriptions to the grand lady for reimbursement. She was stingy with her silver, yet couldn't argue my case. After just 3 or 5 such incidents, she exempted me from morning and evening visits. Xu Nanny once invoked the dowager's authority to pressure me, demanding Su Shui return to her service. I smiled at the dowager and said, Su Shui returning to serve Xu Nanny is perfectly acceptable. But I wonder how Xu Nanny intends to reward her? Why not simply give her your monthly allowance? Just as I serve you, dowager, and you always bestow gifts upon me. Watching the sudden pallor spread across both mistress and servant, I added with measured deliberation, after all, the emperor isn't short of starving soldiers, would you not agree? When Xu Mam invoked filial piety to pressure me, I countered that exploiting filial duty to exploit a daughter-in-law was utterly shameless. Qin Ziliang, at a loss, knelt to beg my consent, promising to place all future monthly funds under Su Shui's control, even offering his entire fortune on the spot. Seeing Su Shui's interest piqued, I tested Qin Ziliang. Madame Zhu is advanced in years and will eventually need a daughter-in-law's care. When that time comes, Su Shui must attend to her mother-in-law and will likely no longer serve me. Qin Ziliang gritted his teeth. Mother may be elderly, but she's still in good health. She's nowhere near needing a daughter-in-law's constant care. If that day ever comes, we'll simply hire another young maid. See? That's men for you. When their own interests are at stake, solutions suddenly appear, don't they? I granted Su Shui's request to return with him. Qin Ziping, seeing this, grew frantic. He crawled forward on his knees, repeatedly kowtowing. I idly toyed with my teacup, turning to the children. You all know about Qin Ziping and Su Wan's affair. Now tell me, should I have agreed? The children chattered in unison, mostly urging reconciliation. I then asked Xiaojie. She twisted her handkerchief, gathered her courage to glance at Qin Jian, and whispered softly, Mother once taught me, if you forgive others too easily, people won't see your generosity. Instead, they'll think you're easy to bully and will only become more brazen next time. Mother also said empty apologies are utterly useless. True repentance requires concrete actions. Her gaze swept over Qin Jian, her meaning clear, just as father, after realizing his mistake, not only handed over his salary to mother to manage, but also frequently sent gifts to win her favor. Qin Jian froze, then snapped to attention, kicking Qin Ziping, you fool. Living this long and still not as wise as a young lady. Only then did Qin Ziping grasp the meaning, kowtowing repeatedly, I swear on my life. From now on, I will treat Su Wan well. I will hand over my entire monthly allowance and leave all household matters to her arrangement. I glanced at Qin Jian with slight surprise. He immediately rose, bowing deeply with utmost respect. My lady, I was foolish in the past. Today, I solemnly apologize to you. After a brief pause, he added, from this day forward, not only the Fufeng courtyard, but all matters concerning my person shall be under your command. I've always understood the wisdom of knowing when to stop. But before he drew near, I laid down 3 conditions. If my lord stays tonight, he must never touch another woman again. Not those gifted by elders, nor those bestowed by superiors, nor even when I am indisposed. I glanced at him sideways. Have you thought this through? His expression darkened instantly, the Confucian principles of marital authority awakening. A man having 3 wives and 4 concubines is the natural order. Why must you, madam, be so unconventional? Seeing my unyielding stance, his tone softened. Over this past year, he'd finally learned to read the room. Without another word, I kicked him off the bed. Then we shall continue as mere acquaintances. I adjusted my robe. It's not that I'm jealous, it's simply that since childhood, I've been fastidious. I cannot bear sharing a husband. My gaze swept over his lower body, and I snorted lightly, I find it filthy. Qinjian's face turned ashen, his chest heaving violently. Master, do as you please. Qinjian's pride wouldn't allow him to back down. For half a month, he slept in the outer study. The wet nurse urged me anxiously, we've waited so long for Master to change his mind. Why push him away again? I idly sorted through the ledgers, it matters little. We're merely sharing a household. Whether he stays in the main courtyard or not makes no difference to me. Summoning Su Wan and Su Shui, I spoke plainly, now that life is smooth, do you think you can rest easy? Both hurriedly protested their innocence. Men are most inclined to seek profit and avoid harm. You should know in your hearts whether their repentance is genuine or merely out of fear of my authority. I said sternly, in times of peace, one must think of danger. I may not be able to protect you forever. It is only right to plan for yourselves and your children early. Seeing them kneel in confusion, I laid out my plan. Once the daughter is married and the son establishes his own household, I will leave the Qin family. By then, you must decide whether to stay or go. Ignoring their alarmed expressions, I began inquiring about the price of the estate. Qinjian rushed over upon hearing this, grabbing my wrist. Why are you asking about the estate? Could you truly be considering a divorce? Why not? I calmly withdrew my hand. You are allowed to have multiple partners, yet I cannot seek another home? He gritted his teeth, I'll agree. I'll never touch another woman again. Master needn't torment himself. I turned to leave. As the direct descendant of the Qin clan, wouldn't it be laughable to remain with only one wife? But I also refuse to share a husband, it's filthy. Divorce benefits us both. Once Chiao is married off and Sura establishes his own household, I shall request to leave this marriage. For all the years I've devoted to managing this household, I implore you to grant me this. His chest heaved violently. Are you truly so resolute? If you value appearances, we could live in separate quarters. I traced the embroidery on my sleeve. The estate must be maintained. He embraced me from behind, his voice trembling. Don't go. I promise. Seeing my unmoved expression, he solemnly declared, I was a fool before, causing you so much hardship. Though I couldn't disown Qin Zhou's concubine and her children for the sake of appearances, I swear I will never set foot in their chambers again. This life, I will keep only you. I accepted the divorce papers and the banknote, but did not respond to his vow. I'll hold on to this for now. Locking the documents in a box, I lifted my gaze to meet his. As for the rest, time will tell. A flicker of light danced in his eyes before dissolving into a soft sigh, very well. Days flowed by like water. Qinjian treated me with utmost care, dismissing all his concubines and never setting foot in the secondary wives' quarters again. Rumors spread throughout the estate that the master had changed his ways, becoming a rare example of devotion in the capital. Yet I remained indifferent. Privately, I purchased a tranquil 3-courtyard residence in the western part of the city. On the day I secured the deed, my wet nurse hesitated, her words caught in her throat, the master treats you with such care now. Precisely because he is so attentive now, I interrupted, my fingertips tracing the vermilion seal on the deed, then I must remember a man's attentiveness has an expiration date. Some mistakes, once made, forever forfeit the right to be fully trusted. Qinjian learned of my purchase on a rainy night. Watching me organize the deed in ledgers, he fell silent for a long while before asking hoarsely, my lady still does not trust me? In the candlelight, his expression held a touch of melancholy. I closed the ledger, my tone calm, I believe you are genuinely repentant now. But my lord, the most fickle thing in this world is the human heart. Especially. I smiled faintly, one of your standing. His face paled. He opened his mouth, but no words came. After that, he remained considerate toward me, though his eyes held a new, cautious wariness. He no longer spoke of lifelong vows. Instead, he placed his entire salary and the profits from the estates in my hands, even leaving social obligations for me to decide. I accepted it all without complaint, yet never once unlocked the key to his private treasury. 5 years later, Xiao Jie married in grand style. After the banquet dispersed, Chen Jian, having drunk more than his share, gently tugged at my sleeve beneath the eaves. "Madam," his voice slurred, "if only I hadn't left on our wedding night." I withdrew my hand and helped him into his outer robe. "The master is drunk." I turned to gaze at the moonlight in the courtyard. "In this world, there are no ifs." He stared blankly at my retreating figure, finally letting out only a bitter smile. "Now we still live under the same roof, share meals at the same table, and discuss household matters together." To any observer, it would seem a harmonious union, a deep and enduring bond. Only we ourselves know, that night, the divorce papers I tucked away in the box have remained at the very bottom of my dressing table. And the house in the western part of the city is forever kept spotless. I need not wager on the eternity of his true heart. As the wind stirred, I gathered my robe's hem. Chen Jian silently drew the window shutters halfway. "Courteous as guests, that is all." The end.